After an exciting finish to the 2011 NASCAR Championship, there was a lot of hype among fans heading into 2012. A key change coming into the Daytona 500 was the Cup Series' new package. After the controversial tandem drafting dominated the 2011 superspeedways, NASCAR made several changes to the car to promote pack racing, similar to what we see today. To boost the excitement for NASCAR's biggest race even more, 2012 had a wild Speedweeks. Big names dominated on the Cup side, with Kyle Busch winning the Budweiser Shootout in wild fashion. Then, 49 drivers competed in the duels for the 43 starting positions in the Daytona 500. Defending Cup Series champion Tony Stewart won the first Daytona duel, and Matt Kenseth would bring home the second one. With that, the 2012 Daytona 500 field was set, with big names Michael Waltrip, Bill Elliott, and Kenny Wallace missing out. In the lower series, the action continued throughout Speedweeks. Daytona legend Bobby Gerhart won the ARCA event. This was followed by a wild Truck Series race that saw underdog John King win his first and only NASCAR race. Possibly the wildest finish imaginable followed the next day when the top 10 crashed out in the final corner, allowing James Buescher to still win. After all of this, the biggest event was still to come. Sunday, February 26th, the Daytona 500, the biggest stock car race in the world. But then, the rain came. And it didn't stop. This pushed the Daytona 500 back to Monday, quite literally washing out much of the anticipation. The race would finally start just after 7 p.m. This was 30 hours after the anticipated start time. Greg Biffle took the early lead as the packed stands finally were getting the show they came for. But as the cars went past the tri-oval for the first time, trouble struck. Five-time champ Jimmy Johnson, Danica Patrick, and Kurt Busch collected damage.
It's five-time champion Jimmy Johnson. He collects Danica Patrick and the 34.
On the restart, Biffle jumped out to another commanding lead, with the three Roush Fenway cars establishing their dominance early on. But before the pack could really settle in, Ryan Newman lost his car in the back of the pack after suffering a flat tire. Casey Kane and others did a great job of avoiding the spinning Newman. After the Roush dominance early on, it appeared that their biggest challengers would be the Toyotas. Although not all of them qualified well, Denny Hamlin found himself in the lead. The pair of Martin Truex Jr. and Clint Bowyer had each moved up into the top 10 after starting near the back. The pack would settle in behind Hamlin for roughly 25 laps before Jeff Burton made a charge for the lead. He'd find himself in front until the first round of green flag pit stops. At this point, everyone realized how difficult it was to make a move for the lead. This was drastically different than the year prior with tandem drafting, which allowed for lead changes almost every single lap. Either NASCAR had nerfed the ability to create runs too drastically, the drivers were just riding around to make it to the end, or the drivers were not adjusted to this style of racing yet. Whatever the reason was, time would tell. On lap 63, a debris caution would stack the field up to wrap up the first third of the race. Notably, Matt Kenseth's team would diagnose and fix a water pressure issue during the pit stops. This was really the first time in the race a Roush car was buried back in the pack. All eyes were going to be on him to see how well he could get through the field. On lap 81, Jeff Gordon blew up in dramatic fashion, with flames coming out of the back of the car. This was a great break for Matt Kenseth, who had to make an unscheduled green flag pit stop a handful of laps prior. The yellow prevented him from going a lap down. Luckily, it seemed like his water pressure issues were sorted out. On the restart, a new face in Terry Labonte found himself restarting first, after staying on the track when everyone else pitted. Biffle, who appeared to be the race favorite at this point, took another commanding lead shortly after the restart. Then Terry got dumped. Luckily, he didn't hit anything, but did struggle getting out of the grass. By midway, the field had sorted itself out, and all of the favorites were up front. Kenseth had clawed his way back up to the top 5. Biffle, Burton, Hamlin, Edwards, Truex Jr., and Earnhardt Jr. had the fastest machines of anyone. A cool thing at this time was a $200,000 cash bonus for leading lap 100 in the race. It looked like Biffle had it secured until Denny Hamlin pushed his Toyota teammate Martin Truex Jr. to claim the midway payday. Weirdly, Clint Bowyer just ran out of gas, bringing out another yellow on lap 128. He still should have been able to make it a few more laps. Mark Martin led the field back to green with 69 to go, but it was Denny Hamlin and Greg Biffle who quickly shot back to the lead. One of the biggest upsets making the field was David Stremme. Unfortunately, he had a problem under the hood, ending his chances of a good finish. This yielded the 7th yellow of the day. Now at this point, the race wasn't necessarily a wreckfest. Some spins, mechanical failures, and only one multi-car wreck. This is pretty par for the Daytona 500 at this stage in the race. But things would begin to change under this yellow. This caution led to one of the most infamous moments in Daytona 500 history. Most competitive drivers came down pit road for tires and fuel. There was rain approaching, so there were some drivers who actually opted to stay out, hoping the rain would fall sooner rather than later. If they could catch the rain, get a red flag, and be out front, they had a chance of NASCAR calling the race and declaring them the winner. One driver who had pitted was Juan Pablo Montoya, who was a pretty insignificant player in the race so far. He complained about a vibration and came down pit road a second time. After the team didn't see anything wrong, he began to come around at full speed, trying to stay on the lead lap. Montoya stated he was coming back down pit road for a third time as something still definitely felt off. Then things went terribly wrong.
We just got a report that he was complaining about a bad vibration in every gear.
No, Larry, he just slammed
into the jet dryer.
I think he slammed into the jet dryer.
Most articles conclude that whatever was causing the vibration ultimately broke at the worst possible time, causing his car to shoot to the right in one of the most dramatic incidents in history. Despite the dramatic sight, everyone walked away. It was only the driver of the jet dryer who suffered minor injuries. Unfortunately, a Formula One, NASCAR, and IndyCar winner would be overshadowed by this accident for the rest of his career, at least in the eyes of many NASCAR fans. It really does suck because he was such a good driver and amazing for NASCAR, but he was turned into the butt of the joke for almost a decade. A few iconic things happened during this red flag, which stopped the race for about 2 hours. Hilariously, the NASCAR team brought out boxes of laundry detergent to wash the track down. Brad Keselowski made the tweet heard around the world, sending many NASCAR fans to Twitter. This really made the NASCAR community on Twitter come alive. Then this video of Dale Jr. and Brad Keselowski rushing to the Porta-John was a plus. Speaking of Jr., Montoya's car ended up in his famous race car graveyard. Not to mention, the red flag coverage was amazing. The fans, drivers, and crews were exhausted, and it just made for great TV. Now, during this 2-hour red flag, Dave Blaney had been the race leader. Remember, rain was expected to come. It's the reason he didn't pit while everyone else did. And rain did come. Between the jet dryer incident and some light rain, Blaney's team may have made the perfect call. Unfortunately for them, it didn't work out. Just before midnight, the red flag was lifted and the cars were rolling again. Kenseth was handed the lead after the top few cars came down pit lane for their final stops. Just 10 laps later, the 8th caution of the day came out when a couple of cars slid through the infield. With 19 to go, it was Kenseth and Biffle who jumped out to another lead on the restart, but Dale Jr. and Denny Hamlin were right on their tail. Then, Jamie McMurray was turned in front of the field with just 13 laps to go for the biggest wreck of the day. Most of the front runners were ahead of the wreck. The most notable drivers involved were Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski. Biffle and Kenseth dominated yet another restart, followed by another big wreck with just 4 laps to go. This wreck was also toward the back half of the field. The wreck started with Stewart, but also collected Kyle Busch and Dave Blaney, who just 45 minutes earlier thought he had a chance of winning the thing. Then it was time for the final restart. Biffle and Kenseth had plenty of practice restarting first and second, and they executed this one perfectly. Despite Junior's best efforts, it seemed like Biffle was playing defense for his teammate Matt Kenseth to win his second Daytona 500. The best team in Jack Roush won the race, and you can make a case as to whether the 16 or 17 was faster. After the race, NASCAR had to rip up part of Turn 3 affected by the jet dryer incident and resurface it. Despite the delays, the race had an average audience of 13.7 million viewers, up over 20% from the 2011 event. All the hype leading up to the race definitely played a factor. But also, this race may have set a precedent for the future of NASCAR start times. Despite being held on a Monday night, it was the first primetime start time for a Daytona 500. Many in the industry had to have been shocked by the increase. Experts must have attributed the start time as a main reason for the viewership increase. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That's it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.